I remember this producer walked in and I had my Bible just sitting on the desk, and he walked by and he was like, "Oh man, the Bible, that's like the best." And I could tell he's not a believer, but he still has a familiarity with the Bible, so now he knows, okay, I'm a Christian. And then that ended up turning into, like, sometime a little bit later,
And whatsoever you do, in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. That's Colossians 3, verse 17. Young Christian man, welcome back to Seeking Wisdom, the podcast to help Christian young men see life from God's perspective. I'm a big believer, and I hope you are too, that everything in our lives needs to be glorifying to God, right? One area, though, that we tend to forget about that we tend to neglect, is that even our entertainment ought to be something that glorifies Christ, right? But in order for that to happen, there has to be someone who is actually producing entertainment that can glorify Christ, that can help us and edify us as believers. So I am joined today by my cousin, DJ, who is also in that very industry. He is creating entertainment that is profitable and that's helpful and that you can watch without, having to have 1,000 filters on and feel like you're dirty after you finish watching it. So DJ, welcome to the show.
And thank you for having me.
DJ, could you go ahead and introduce yourself to us? Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Daniel said, I am his cousin and my name is DJ, and I moved out to California like 10 years ago. So it's been like a decade, which is pretty crazy. So I've been out here, and since then I have been studying film and then entered into the actual industry. So I've done that everywhere from, being just like a production assistant to being a production supervisor to being a screenwriter. So I've had a lot of different experiences in that. And so, yeah, just been doing that recently. And so far it's going pretty well.
That's really awesome. All those terms sound really cool. Production supervisor and
it's really not that cool. I just look at spreadsheets all day. So it's,
it's basically a business major at that point.
Yeah.
Well, DJ, what got you interested in the film industry in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. So whenever I was originally living in Florida, my dad was the media director at our church. And so he was, running all the cameras, directing all the cameras, all that fun stuff. And so because I am his son by proxy, I was naturally just around all that stuff. And I was like running cameras in church. And so it's something I really enjoyed. And I was, still like in high school. And so I didn't really have this like massive plan for my life of like, oh, this is what I really want to do. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I guess I'll just like go to film school one day. And so that kind of got the ball rolling. Now things have kind of pivoted as far as direction within the film industry for me, but that's what kind of got that ball rolling for me of wanting to kind of get into that industry.
So from that point, then after you've figured out this is what you want to do, what's the process to get from there to where like you're actually in the film industry?
Yeah, for sure. So there's different tracks on how you can get into the film industry. Some believe that you should go to college. That's the route that I went. So I went to Biola University, which is essentially, the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. And from there, I went and got a film degree. So I went in as a film major, and then I had an emphasis in screenwriting. So then I had, general film classes of like, hey, like how do you compose a shot and how do you do film business, to then very specific things of like, hey, this is how you write a script. This is how you do script coverage, all that fun stuff. So that's the route that I went. Other people say that you don't have to do that at all. Just get a job in the industry however you can, even if it's just, driving people around on set, and then just get experience and then work your way up. So there really is no set way to get in. There's, a million different ways, but that's the route that I went, was going through film school, making connections, and then finding my way in that way.
Gotcha. Now, whenever you went to film school, is there a specific degree you're looking for each part of the industry, or is it just one general like film degree?
Yeah, for sure. So at least whenever I was in school, our school had 3 different emphasis. So you have like a production, which is very broad. It's essentially, it's anything from, hey, this is how you do cinematography to directing to lighting, sound, all that kind of stuff. Then you have producing, and then you have screenwriting. And so I went the screenwriting route. But again, because of that, like I still had the general classes that were interesting. They weren't exactly what I wanted to do, but it's still good to know, like, hey, this is how you compose a shot, and this is what lighting does and stuff like that. But yeah, for me, most of my classes then were also very specific to screenwriting, which other emphasis wouldn't necessarily have. And then from that, I was able to learn how to write scripts, and then how to, you know, create different documents that you would need to help pitch documents and all that. So yeah, that's kind of how that looked from me, at least.
That's pretty cool. What exactly is a screenwriter?
Yeah, I don't know. That's essentially, a screenwriter is someone who writes a screenplay for either a film or a TV show. And so essentially, anytime you watch something on TV or like on Netflix or something like that, a screenwriter is the person who basically writes out the entire story, everything from like action to dialogue on a script. And then from that, they then shoot according to that script. So if, you know, I was like, oh, so-and-so walks across the room and, you know, punches someone and says, just kidding, I love you. I would write that whole thing, and then they would take that and then go shoot it. And then that's what it would kind of become. So basically, I'm responsible for pretty much everything that you would see. Now, obviously, depending on who is attached to the project, the director could completely go and do his own thing. That actually happened on a project where I was working at a production company down in Santa Monica, and I had the privilege of being just like an office PA while a director was working on a show for Netflix. And when I was there, I learned that they had a screenwriter, as you always do, who like wrote the whole script and everything, but the director decided to go and completely do his own thing. And it worked out. It got nominated for an Emmy, but it just kind of depends on how the director wants to go about it. But typically the director will go according to the script.
That's pretty crazy. So basically you're like the whole brains behind behind everything at that point.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then the director would be the one who takes that and actually turns it into something that you can watch.
Yep.
That makes sense. So in this whole process of doing all this, like learning to get into the industry, now being in the industry, how long would you say you've been like actually in the industry?
I started in the summer of 2021. Yep. So I guess that puts me at like technically 5 years, but I did take like a year gap, just because I kind of need to step away a little bit because the industry is very dark. And so I just kind of needed a little bit of space, but I would say like pretty much like 4 to 5 years.
Okay. So in those 4 or 5 years of doing that, plus your time, before, how would you say you've had the opportunity to share your faith through all of that? Because like you said, it's a pretty dark place. I imagine, at least I've never been there, but I imagine you would have a lot of chances to be able to share your faith, even outside of work, just like in normal life, living in California.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what's interesting is in Hollywood, it's kind of taboo to talk about religion to an extensive degree. And so if you're like, oh, I'm a Christian, like that like can immediately cause people to build up walls. And so you kind of have to learn how to navigate different relationships on how to share your faith and when to share it. Because sometimes it can kind of, at least to me, can kind of feel like a closed country where it's like I had to kind of like sneak in a little bit of like, hey, like I'm a Christian, but if I'm just like out here like, hey, Jesus, it's like I'm gonna get fired, So you really have to be kind of like wise in how you go about it. And so because of that, There's been a range, even just from very small things to like really big conversations that I've been able to have. And I think one verse that really kind of helps to guide that is in Ephesians, where Paul talks about redeeming the time, or another way that it's been translated is making the most of every opportunity. And with that, sometimes we're presented with a very small opportunity to share the gospel. Maybe it's just like, a small conversation, or someone is just like hearing about their faith the first time, or, we just like bump into them at the, the grocery store or whatever it is, or in the hallway at work. And then it's like, oh, like, let me just completely download the entire gospel to you. And it's kind of like, it's too much in that moment. Or there's times whenever there's a perfect opportunity to share the gospel, and then we don't make the most of the opportunity, and when we miss that chance to share the gospel. And so whether it's in the film industry, or even if you're in the Bible Belt or whatever it is, it's making the most of those opportunities to share the gospel. And so what that looks like for me is even small things and simple things. I shared earlier how I was on that the post-production team for a show that was going to Netflix. I remember this producer walked in, and I had my Bible just sitting on the desk that I was at, and he walked by and he was like, "Oh man, the Bible, that's like the best, piece of literature that was ever created and stuff." And I could tell that he's not a believer, but he still has a familiarity with the Bible, so now he knows, okay, I'm a Christian, and then I think that ended up turning into like sometime a little bit later, he's in the kitchen in the office, and then like the two editors, I can't remember if the director was there, and he just starts asking me like, "Oh, it's like, what denomination are you?" and stuff like that. And so here we are having this like full blown like conversation in the kitchen, and it's just like, okay, and so I was able to share a little bit more. And so there's sometimes you just get small opportunities, and if in that moment I was like, "Hey, by the way, you're all going to hell," like that probably wouldn't be the best time to be like loading the gospel, but the most I could do in that moment is like, hey, like they know I'm a Christian, and I know they're watching me, so I know that whenever they see how I work, that's a way that I share my faith. It's been said that how's the quote go? I'm blanking on it now. Wherever you go, share your faith, and if you have to, use words. Like our actions are a demonstration of what we believe, right? And so the way that I work, the way that I treat people at work, everything like that is a demonstration of what I believe, and people can see that. And so when they see, oh, DJ's different, and they know that I'm a Christian, they're more than likely going to kind of put those two together, which then could lead to more conversations, or at the very least, it plants a seed in their heart to then for some time down the road, another Christian comes across their path, and then that person's able to water that seed, right? And so it can be small things like that. Or I've had opportunities to have really big conversations. I remember staying like hours after work with a couple of guys, and we were just having like really deep conversations about faith and like what we believe and what their concerns or their disagreements were, and just being able just to have those conversations. As far as I know, like they're still not believers, but I was able to have those conversations. Seeds were hopefully planted. And again, I don't know what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road. But again, it really just kind of comes down to having that wisdom of knowing this is the best opportunity to share my faith in this moment. And then I'm going to take it. I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to underdo it. And I'm going to trust God with the results.
That is such a cool perspective.
We
get so locked in like,
go ahead.
This perspective of like, it needs to be this way. You always do this, meet somebody, hand them a tract and tell them, this is the gospel, 3 steps, the ABCs of salvation or something. But it's not always like that. And I don't know, it's really cool hearing how you've been faithful to share the gospel, but you have to get creative with it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm not the best at it. Like I'm still learning. I still get afraid sometimes. I was at a restaurant last night, just like picking up some dinner, and I had an opportunity just to like invite someone to church. Like, hey, I go to the church, at Rocky Peak down the road, stuff like that. And I freaked out and I didn't say anything, so I still like miss opportunities and stuff. But like you're saying, like, yeah, like it does take some creativity, and, wise as serpents, harmless as doves, and just asking God for the opportunities and the wisdom to navigate them.
Okay. Another question, how has your walk with God shaped your work or been shaped by your work? Because I know that probably goes both ways sometimes.
Good question. I would say for sure, whenever I'm creating something, especially if I'm like writing a script and stuff like that, you typically have what you would call a theme. And so, for example, I'm trying to think of a good one. Let's see. Of course, I'm blanking on everything right now. Okay, here's one that I don't totally agree with, but it's still my favorite movie, where Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, there's this general theme that anyone can be a superhero. Now, we can debate that. I wrote a paper about it in college, but that's the theme of the movie, right? And so typically, what I try to do is have some sort of biblical theme in the stories that I'm writing. So for me, I'm not someone who, at least typically, writes something that's straight up Christian, like VeggieTales or House of David, stuff like that. And then, so what I typically write, for a lack of a better word, is like secular content, but with a Christian worldview. So for example, I wrote a Lego spec script, and for the pilot episode, a lot of it has to do with like hope, right? So obviously Lego isn't like a Christian thing, you know, but I'm still able to point kids to a godly principle, right? And so for me, that kind of really shapes how I go about the material that I'm writing. And so there's this saying that you have a character arc, right? Which is simply just the character is one way at the start of the story and then grows to be something else at the end of the story, right? And so for me, yes, obviously I want that in my in my shows and in my movies because I want to make good material. But more than that, I also want my audience to arc. Like I want my audience to be different whenever they are done with the story, right? And so again, it may not be like, hey, here's how you go to heaven, you know, that may not be the arc for them, but it could be, hey, this is how you're kind to your neighbor, or hey, this is how you're brave, right? And to me, again, it kind of goes back to the principle earlier of making the most of every opportunity. I may not be able to straight up share the gospel in the show, but if I can have someone be a little bit more Christ-like, even if they don't even know it, to me, that's a win. So why not? So that's kind of the way that my faith has been shaping the content that I've been creating.
That's really cool. It's kind of like what Tolkien did a little bit. Like there's nothing in Lord of the Rings that is, you know, like here's the 3 steps of salvation: admit, believe, confess, or whatever. But it is like everything through it. He's weaving in these biblical themes and truth, and how the hero comes in at the end and saves the day, and like they couldn't have won, and the darkness versus, like, there's all this good stuff. It sounds like you're doing kind of a similar thing, and it's really, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think even to your point too, like kind of how C.S. Lewis says that our hearts are guarded by dragons, whether we're Christian or atheist or Buddhist, whatever it is. And essentially those dragons, if you will, really guard our heart from things that we don't want. So for example, if let's say I am an atheist, right? And you're presenting the gospel to me. Well, the dragons of my heart would say, oh no, I'm not listening to that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to believe in whatever you believe. But if you tell me a story, that actually is something that gets past the dragons of the heart. And that's what C.S. Lewis talks about in one of his quotes, essentially that stories get past those dragons. And it's almost like a Trojan horse sort of a thing. And so sometimes we're able to package the gospel in certain ways where people are actually more readily and willing to receive it because it gets past their dragon sensors, and they actually then have that seed planted in their heart, where otherwise if it was just like debate or something like that, it wouldn't have as much of an effect.
That's cool too. I wonder if that's why Jesus taught in stories so often, because like he could, I mean, I guess it would just be part of it, but he can tell a story and, you know, like smack you upside the head, tell you you're wrong. This is like, you're living your life the wrong way. But at the end, you're like, man, I kind of feel good about it at the same time, you know? I've been rebuked with love.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, this is just kind of a fun question, but are there any projects you're working on that you can tell us about?
Nope. No. Yeah, for sure. Oh. So one of them is a a movie for Ben Carson's company called Star Spangled Adventures. And so that is supposed to be coming out this summer for America's 250th. And so we're still working on wrapping all the animation and stuff like that, but we're hoping to drop that this summer. So we're still trying to work through a few things, but that should be coming your way soon. And then on the screenwriting front, there's not unfortunately too much I can share at the moment, but me and my dad are working on a kids animated series together that really just kind of helps direct kids through different stages and difficulties in life. And so again, that's pretty much all I can share at the moment, but we're hoping to have that up and running here soon. And then I was also recently hired to write a script, true story, like 1960s Cold War era. Again, unfortunately, I can't share too much, but I'm currently working on the outline for that and hoping to start writing the script in March.
That sounds really cool. For that Star Spangled Adventures one, if someone wanted to watch that whenever it does come out, where could they find it?
Absolutely. So we are still working on what distribution is going to look like, whether it's going to be theaters or streaming. So I can update you once we kind of have that answer, but we're still trying to work through all that stuff. But again, it should definitely be out this summer. And then if you just search it up, on Google or whatever, and then it'll kind of tell you where you can watch it. And then, go from there.
Gotcha. Now, here's your chance for any shameless plugs. If we wanted to follow you, keep up with your work, anything like that, if we wanted to see any of your past work, is there any place we could go to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can just follow me on Instagram, just simply DJ Screenwriter, I think, or something like that. That's just more my professional Instagram account, or my personal one is just DJ Schaffer 7 on Instagram. And if you want to look at some material, you can go to djschaffer.com. On there, I have the Lego spec script I was talking about. If you're just kind of curious on what a screenplay looks like, hopefully read a good story as well. And then even if you just want to touch base, if you're interested in screenwriting or anything like that, I'd be happy to chat and kind of give some pointers or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, last question before we wrap up today, and I ask this to every guest, but other than Jesus, who is one man that you find yourself wanting to be like?
I think one man that has inspired me is Tim Tebow. Just the strength of his faith, and also how do I say it? He's a very driven individual. Like if you ever see his stuff on social media or even just like his football days, like that dude, I don't know how he does it, but he's just like on like turbo mode all the time. And then also just like the impact he's able to have, and also like he's really ripped. Like that dude is strong, and I would like to be that too. So that's a very, I guess, practical thing. But yeah, I would definitely say Tim Tebow as a guy that has really kind of caught my attention as someone who is godly, is a really good guy, and obviously having a huge impact in the world when it comes to rescuing those who are being trafficked and celebrating those who maybe look down on the world. And so he just has a great heart, and he's just completely unashamed of Jesus.
It's awesome. All good reasons. Love that. Well, DJ, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been, and I feel like I've learned a lot through this. I had no idea what a screenwriter was stepping into it, but now I know, and know a little bit more about the process, and just some really cool perspectives on being able to share your faith. So thank you very much for being on today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that was a very fun episode with DJ. I was not messing around or joking whenever I said that it was very helpful. I loved his perspective on sharing the gospel. It reminded me of another book, and here's your first resource for this week. It's called Tactics by Gregory Kukul. Tactics. And he talked about a very similar thing. In the Bible where Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. as Christians, our job is not so much to be the one who gets them saved. Like, you may plant and plant and plant and plant and share the gospel many times without ever seeing an increase. And you may be in situations where you may not actually get to be the person who walks them through the 3 steps through the Romans road or whatever, and tells them this, here's the gospel in a nutshell. It may be that your job is to show them that there's something different about Christianity. It may be that your job is to be a light, to be salt and light. There may be different parts to this. You may be part of a much larger, bigger picture, bigger story of someone coming to faith in Christ. And the book Tactics by Gregory Kukul talks about that a little bit. Of course, DJ just told us about his experience with that in California. And so I would think on that if I were you, and maybe consider reading that book. Definitely consider reading the book. It's super helpful, very practical, hands-on, anybody can do it kind of stuff. Other resources, if you want to learn more about DJ and his work, obviously he told you about his Instagram page, DJ Screenwriter, and then he told you about his website that I just looked it up before I recorded this part. It's called djschaffer.com, and it is actually really cool. He's got some projects on there, and I think you can see the script for that Lego short that he was talking about. And then you can also see he has a blog about being a screenwriter, so he's got some really cool articles on there. If you're interested in learning how to screenwrite, then that would be a great place for you to start and learn about that. Anyway, thank you guys for listening today. Until next time, act like men, be strong.